Biden at the scene of a horrific fatality.
Protesters gathering outside.
A pair of thieves bashed in her front door and started stealing stuff.
Hard to believe it's Winter Weather Awareness Week this week.
We started asking questions.
Hey everybody, this is officially the first episode of the Working Behind the Screens podcast. I am Nate Harrington, joined by Matt Galka. Matt, how's it going, buddy?
Nate, we're live. Forget the pilot episode. Forget that. That's in the past right now. We're live right now. The first podcast. You're excited. I'm excited. And I think this is going to be really, really good.
I think so too. Yeah, we had the initial podcast last week, and it is right now online at behindthescreenspodcast.com. We've got all sorts of social media links for you there. But just to run down some of the housekeeping, we have set up all of our social media on Twitter. We are WBTS Pod on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page that is Working Behind the Screens on Facebook. Also, you can get us on YouTube, WBTS Pod, and on Podbean as well, WBTS Pod. So just search WBTS Pod. That's where a lot of our social media will go, except for Facebook, and that's Working Behind the Screens podcast.
But if you go to one, you should be able to access them all. It should be real easy once you get
absolutely.
there. And once you get there, you'll see we're going to be talking about a few things today. You're going to be able to see the headlines we're talking about, and we'll get to that in just a minute. You'll be able to interact with us. You'll have our personal Twitter handles on there. We'd love to hear what you guys think. And importantly, please like, share, tell your friends, tell us about it, leave a review, do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, even if it makes us feel bad about our product. But please tell us how we're doing. Please like, share, comment, get the word out. And Nate, for everybody who did not listen to our pilot episode, just, what are we doing here? Tell everybody what we're all about.
I kind of coined the term or the phrase while I was writing the description for this podcast, and I like it. We're going to tell the stories of the storytellers. So a lot of local news folks work hard every single day to hammer out news stories. Some of them are serious, some of them aren't, but they work hard every day, and they take an 8-hour day and condense it down into a minute 15 or a minute 30 story that you see on the news. Well, we want to tell everyone, not just people in the news business, in the industry, we want to tell everybody how hard these people work and how much effort goes into producing local news content that not only sometimes is seen locally, but in a bigger story can be seen on a national level. And tonight we're actually going to talk to somebody who worked on one of those tragic, actually, national stories, local story that went national pretty quickly. And that's Lauren St. Germain, and she works in Chattanooga at WTVC in Chattanooga, and she covered the Chattanooga school bus crash that happened on the Monday of Thanksgiving week. So we're going to be talking to her a little bit later on in the podcast about how difficult that story was and what she had to go through for a few days there, covering that very, very tough story. And it looks like Matt has frozen. So we were having trouble with Matt a little while ago, and it looks like he is now on the fritz. So that's what happens.
No, good.
Matt,
we're good.
Are you back? Fantastic.
I'm back.
Fantastic.
I'm back.
Okay. Well, did you agree with everything that I talked about?
I agree. And one of the things I was also I heard most of it. One of the things I was also thinking about is something we learned, especially this last election cycle. Oh, so many people got it wrong. All the national people got it wrong. Nobody listened to the people. Well, who listens to the people every day? And that's the local reporters who are in those communities who probably could have told you a lot better than the national guys. And I'm not saying the national guys do a bad job, but how much more insight do you get from a local reporter, the boots on the ground, than somebody who was flown in that day because it's the tragedy, it's flavor of the week is the awful expression to use, but it's the tragedy of the day. So that's what I hope we get across with this podcast. We talk to the real people who are really there, not just the, kind of the cookie cutter people who bring it to everybody nationally. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to learn a lot on this podcast, and I'm real excited.
Yeah, me too. All right. And a part of the podcast that we're going to feature every week, besides having a guest on to talk about their experiences, is we're going to talk about some stories that are local but kind of made some national headlines. There are going to be some that are serious, some that are a little bit irreverent or goofy, especially our Florida story of the week, Matt. We're going to be talking about that too. So
your home state. It's your home state.
My home state. You work there, so you've got a little bit more insider knowledge, but you've been corrupted too. I'm just saying. First of all, we're going to talk about a story real quick that happened here in my market. I'm in Birmingham, and this story happened yesterday. Just a bizarre chain of events. Last night, we had 4 people die. 2 people were rescued. 1 person still missing, actually, at this hour. They drove an SUV right into the Coosa River in Cherokee County, Alabama. It was bizarre because of how it all unfolded. We heard a 911 call from someone in the car. We heard people that heard the car go in and screaming. It was a bizarre scene. Today, they still haven't found the 1 person that's missing. And the details of the story are still a little bit murky because one of the victims was one of the people that was driving. And from one of the eyewitnesses that was rescued, he was told, look, you're going into the water. Stop. He did not. Didn't stop. It was a bizarre thing. And like this, where there's so unanswered questions, and basically the only person that has the answers can't give them to you. And so the police have a really tough case on their hands.
And I think one of the things that always happens with stories like this, because, and look, we're going to have a good time in this podcast, but a lot of news that we're going to talk about is bad news. I mean, let's face it. That's the world we live in. And unfortunately, if it was all good news, we wouldn't have jobs, Nate. That's true. People care about the bad news. But one of the things I always think about, one of the things that's always lost in this is that 4 people died. 4 people died in this. And unfortunately, and I'm not saying we got to beat people over the head with that, but 4 people died because somebody jumped into a river for God knows why. And it's one of those things where, and you've been around news for a better part of a decade now, maybe I think over a decade. I've been covering news for 6 years now. Every time I cover a death story, I do really try to think about the people. And because it's not just the reporter covering it, it's not the police officer we're talking to. I mean, this might be a 1, 2, 3 day story for some station, but 4 people are dead, and that's going to last a lot longer than however long your station's going to cover it and the Birmingham market is going to cover it. And that's one thing I always think about when I think about tragedies like this. And for this one too, a senseless one at that. I mean, not that anything really makes sense when people die, but we don't have the answers. What happened? And and it's going to be, here's how these things usually play out. The police will come to a determination that driver X was probably, impaired or whatever they're going to come to, and then that's that. But we really don't know. Why did they drive into the river? And we might never know. And that's sad. That's sad. It is.
And I'm actually going to speak to one of the reporters that cover this, try to get some of her insight too. And I might write a blog post on the website, which you can read too. I think that'll be an interesting thing because it's a tough story to follow. Another tough story that has been in the news since the 2nd of December is the Ghost Ship Warehouse fire in Oakland. More than 36 people died in this fire, and the ATF just recently released a report. And like we just talked about, inconclusive. They don't know how the fire started. They have a decent idea where it might have started, in a refrigerator in a back room. But just another tragedy. And the sound bites that came out of this from Oakland over the past 2 or 3 weeks past 2 weeks, I should say, it's been heartbreaking. I saw one from a local affiliate, but then got aired on the CBS Evening News of a man who lived there, moved just a couple of weeks before, and said, this was a great place to be. All the people were great. Did he feel safe there? Absolutely not. But he still lived there because rent was cheap and just the atmosphere. So it's a catch-22 in this situation. But another thing, you have to be really careful when you cover stories like this, to be able to get that human element, but also to report the facts like you were talking about.
And I think, I read something, it was it was more of an opinion piece, but, this fire, don't blame the people who were partying, or don't blame the people, blame the housing crisis that's going on in that part of the country.
Correct.
And that's a really tough pill to swallow, I think. Blame the housing crisis. I mean, you're living there because rent's cheap. I don't think you expect to, die. You know what I mean? That's just not something that should be happening. And, when I first heard about this, and you might remember this, back in 2003, there was the fire at a nightclub in Rhode Island. A band was playing, and people were trapped. And because of, I think it was an electric short or pyrotechnics, the band was, I'll never forget this. I remember waking up and seeing this, and the band was called Great White. And I remember at 2003, I actually, how old was I? I wasn't old enough to drink yet. But I remember, because it was in a bar and it was in a nightclub. And I've always thought about that story, and I think about it even more now, because this was like this warehouse fire, this warehouse kind of club fire, whatever it was. I think about it now, and I think about bars I go to, when you go out with your friends. If a fire happened, I don't know if I'd be able to get out. Like that's something, it's a scary thing. But I still go to these places, and it's one of those things like, oh, that's never going to happen to me. And then you see it in Oakland, and the best one I could cite is from 2003. So it was 13 years ago. That's a good amount of time, but these things happen. And it's crazy because these people definitely didn't think there was going to be a fire that night. And of course, the worst case scenario happens.
Yeah, and I haven't seen all of the local coverage on it, but I did see that's an angle that one of the Oakland stations did play up. They went to a local bar and said, "Hey, look, if this kind of stuff happens, what's the recourse? Where are the exits? All that kind of stuff." And it's shocking that they have that mentality. Well, it's not going to happen here.
Right.
We're up to code, and we're everything's fine here, but that kind of stuff can affect anybody at any time, and you just never know. So obviously,
everyone's always up to code until the worst case scenario happens. Anybody who's listening, and I'm not saying like, oh, be afraid next time you go out, but it's just something to think about. We take a lot of things for granted, and we hope like if something bad happened, we'll be able to get out. But I think about how many times do you not listen to the in-flight safety instruction before a plane? Or before a movie, they tell you what exits to go to during a fire. Nobody listens. And then something like this happens, and all of a sudden, well, we wish we were listening, or we wish that somebody at some point had put that building up to code and made more exits.
Yep, that's exactly right. No easy way to segue between this, but let's kind of dispatch with the doom and gloom. We'll talk about it.
For the record, I mentioned segues would be a problem. Segues would be a problem because news has been.
That's all right. That's okay. Sometimes it happens. This is just a bizarre story. This is out of Minnesota. 4 years ago, a mother realized that her baby was mixed up, that somebody else was caring for her child, breastfeeding her child, and now she has just now sued that hospital 4 years after the fact for treatment that had to be done, and some other medical treatments that the baby needed, some medical tests for certain diseases, because this child was breastfed by a mother that wasn't his. These kind of delicate stories always fascinate me, because there's a line of, well, you don't want to get too involved and too gory with the details, but that's kind of the basis of the story. Why? That's
what fascinates you? What about
it? Does.
You know what fascinates me? If you're the hospital, how do you mix up the baby? The baby. Oh, what's one baby? Yeah, I think this is your kid. How do you mix up the baby, Nate?
Well, that's fairly obvious, Matt. It's fairly obvious. I'm trying to go another level here.
Next level analysis on baby mix-ups?
Yeah. I'm trying. Because but it is. How do you, as a reporter, when you're trying to cover the story, delicately massage the details into something that's, palatable for the general public, for local news. It's tough. And, reading at least one of the sites and listening to the story that was posted on one of the sites that is also on our website, you can go and click on all the links that we're talking about tonight on our website.
The stuff you need to know.
Absolutely. It's just, I feel like there was some stuff that might have been left out that could have been intertwined in the story that was probably left out because of the nature of the story. And sometimes you get the whole view, sometimes you don't. That's always the prerogative of the person covering the story or the news director making the calls. And some people would be more, I guess, verbose with the details, and some people aren't. So
I feel like you're doing exactly what you're talking about, Nate, right now. You're trying to delicately massage the details of this story. Let's call it like it is. Yep. Doctors mixed up, wrong breastfeeding. Hopefully the kid never finds out. Could scar him for life. I mean, that's personal opinion, but it's one of those crazy stories, and frankly, I'm surprised it's in Minnesota and not Florida. And I'm just kidding.
Well, of course. Why would you even question that?
You have experience in Minnesota, though. You've been in Minnesota.
I do, absolutely, yeah. It's strange too because the Minnesota health system is regarded as one of the country's best. I mean, it's phenomenal. But I guess this kind of stuff can happen anywhere. And speaking of Florida,
my favorite part of the whole rundown.
Here's your Florida story of the week. A fake dentist.
I love this.
A fake dentist pulls 10 teeth and made dentures for people. So evidently, this came out. He's been doing this for 3 years now. This one couple finally, after several different procedures and several different treatments from this fake dentist, finally said, you know what, maybe this guy isn't a real dentist. Looked him up, found out, he doesn't have a dental license. He was actually a dental technician in South Carolina, moved to Florida.
That's a start.
Yeah, something. He held the spit cup and held a little suction thing, and that's about all he was qualified to do, evidently.
Mr. Thirsty. Mr. Thirsty is what my dentist used to call it.
So now he's pulling teeth and using didn't use anesthetic, but using some localized Novocaine or something like that. But yeah, one of the pieces of this article said the couple that used this guy, they had a procedure done in their living room, and the guy's recliner pulled a tooth.
Fake dentist? What gave it away?
It's a fake dentist. Hey. Evidently, he had a brick and mortar place he was doing this, but he made a lot of house calls.
Hey,
I don't know.
I'm going to tell you this much right now. This
made a lot of house
This is
calls.
one of the most ridiculous stories I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. First of all, I hate the dentist. I hate the dentist. I don't know why. Maybe I had a lot of cavities as a kid. I used to have braces, and I just do not like the dentist. Mm-mm. The idea of a fake dentist pulling my teeth out of my mouth without Novocaine is like stuff nightmares are made out of.
Yeah. Not good.
First of all, the idea of going to somebody's house to get your teeth pulled out of a recliner might sound nice and relaxing, but then you realize, wait a second, we're not in a dentist's office anymore.
No.
And look, I know times are tough. Maybe not everybody has dental insurance. I get it. Did you have to have the teeth pulled, or was he just pulling them because he told you had to have them pulled?
Well, see, that was the thing. They looked him up. And they found this guy and said, "Hey, this seems good." They let him pay him in cash,
and this was
didn't have to file any insurance.
This was in Manatee, Florida, and it
was in Bradenton.
I'm sorry, Manatee County.
Which is in Manatee County. Yeah.
I had a buddy once tell me or ask me, Matt, is it true that Florida really is a joke in every other part of the country? Because I'm not from Florida, I just live here now. And I looked at him and I said, absolutely yes. Mm-hmm. And between a fake dentist and people throwing alligators through the window of the drive-thru, this place ain't all Disney World and South Beach, okay?
No.
And you got dentist.
So you can expect stories like these from here on out. We're going to have a Florida story every single week to
A fake
lighten
dentist.
the load.
Not fake news, fake dentist.
Fake dentist.
Real news. Running
Yeah.
around Florida.
Yeah. Also, one feel-good story. I like to throw in a feel-good story too. And this time of year, there's a lot of them. We all have Secret Santas. I'm doing a Secret Santa with a bunch of friends. Well, a Secret Santa in the
Secret's out.
I haven't told anybody who my Secret Santa person is. Secret Santa in the Pittsburgh area walks into a school, pays off all the overdue lunch balances for the students, and actually singles one kid out that had a kind of an exorbitant amount and went ahead and paid for the rest of the school year. Love stories like this. These were my favorite stories to do when I had MMJ. These were, you get the real emotion. You always look for the perfect shot of someone crying, which is really great. But these are the good stories. These are the ones that keep us sane. I think you deal with all the terrible stuff, but stuff like this makes you happy to be able to come to work every day and get to tell stories that actually mean something to people and can maybe change people's lives. This story might inspire somebody else to do the same thing somewhere else.
And one of the things I always wondered is, and you talk to, we've all talked to consultants, we've talked to management, and a lot of the philosophy is the same. This isn't a features business. If it bleeds, it leads. You hear all that kind of news speak. Everybody clicks on the bad news, and don't get me wrong, people do click on the bad news. That's what they do click on. But how many people remember the bad news, or how many people remember a story like this? And that's what I always think about when I hear good stories. Is that this is the story I'd remember if I were to watch a newscast, if Station X has the fatal accident, Station Y has the fatal accident, Station Z they all have the fatal accident. We all have that one. But it's stories like this that would make me remember a particular station. So I like stories like this too. And I know a lot of people got into this business not to necessarily tell stories like this, but to tell stories. And this is one of those memorable stories that I think really does make an impact on local communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll do stories like this too and talk about how, reporters can be kind of beacons of light in their communities. And I think that too is another reason why people get into this business is to make a difference, like Matt said. So we'll have stories like this.
And remember all these stories, behindthescreenspodcast.com. You can see all the stories we're talking about. And then, and right now we're recording the podcast. Eventually, I don't want to give too much away, but eventually we do want to do a live element here. And interact with people about the stories we're talking about. So keep that in mind, but scroll over to the website, look at the stories we're talking about, to be able to see some of the articles, see some of the video, and get a better idea of what we're talking about instead of us, just trying to describe it. We're a visual medium, Nate. We're a visual medium.
That's what I've heard.
What they tell me.
That's what they tell me. All right. We want to bring in our guest tonight, our first guest, our guinea pig guest for this evening. She is a reporter for the last 3 years almost in Chattanooga, TVC, Channel 9 in Chattanooga, I believe. And her name is Lauren St. Germain. Lauren, thanks for joining us on the inaugural episode of Working Behind the Screens.
Lauren,
feel
welcome. So honored. Thanks, guys, for having me.
And when we say guinea pig, we just want you to know there's no pressure here.
So I can totally mess up.
But
right.
This has to be the best thing you've ever done.
No
flawless.
pressure.
Practically flawless.
Yeah. So where you are in Chattanooga, Tennessee itself has had an unbelievable run of just terrible stuff.
Yeah.
It's been a rough month. It really has.
It has been.
We're not even halfway through.
It has been.
No.
Yeah.
And,
tell us about some of the stuff that's been going on in Tennessee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, in Chattanooga, it kind of all goes back to last July 16th, when Muhammad Abdulaziz kind of just came and shot up the area, and it was considered a terrorist attack. And ever since then, I feel like the entire community has been pretty much on edge, but also has came together. And then, man, the past few weeks, it started with, we had some fires around our mountains much before what happened in Gatlinburg, and it was not to that extent at all, but it kind of started with those fires. And then we had the Woodmore bus crash that happened just the week before the week of Thanksgiving, where a bus driver crashed. It was just the typical afternoon bus route. And well, it wasn't, because we actually learned afterwards that he was on not the designated bus route. But 5 kids died that day, and a 6th child died the Wednesday afterward. Elementary school students is just something you never, ever want to have to hear about or tell people about.
And that's kind of what we want to talk to you about tonight is that incident, because it became a national story very quickly. Mm-hmm. You had to kind of be amongst all of the craziness of those days after, dealing with the NTSB and dealing with just the media circus around this event. Tell us what you were doing, what you had to do to cover this story, just the nuts and bolts, and we'll get into a little bit more in a little bit. So what exactly were you doing for this story?
So the accident happened on a Monday, and I worked the weekend, so I was actually supposed to be off Monday, Tuesday. So I kind of watched the whole thing unfold from my house, because I was starting to get alerts on my phone. I was like, what on earth is going on? So I was kind of watching it basically unfold on social media and just kind of not being there. We ended up being straight on the air coverage for multiple hours. And those reporters, we had a few reporters who were out there. I cannot even imagine what it was like being actually out at the scene for a few hours. They were kept so far away back from the scene just because so many emergency responders were there. But then I ended up going into work the next day, and my main job for the next really 3 days, I was the person who went to the NTSB press conferences and kind of focused on the investigation part of it and learning the new details about, because they were gathering all the evidence from the scene and looking at the bus and that sort of thing. And that's where a lot of the national media folks were as well, because those were big press conferences where everyone was at. So it was just like the only other thing I could compare it to in my career so far was July 16th. So it was almost like a terrorist attack to that level, because it was involving kids and it was involving a school bus, and the whole seatbelts issue came up again. And it was just so many people who you had never seen before, and you just had to deal with a lot.
And in this particular case, because you were home the day it was going on, and then you had to come in the next day. So you kind of played the role of viewer and reporter. So when you're seeing it all unfold, and all of your coworkers are being held back, talk about that. And you've been in other situations where the police keep you at a distance. Is that frustrating when things are going on and everybody's just trying to get information? Is that a frustrating time?
It's frustrating, but you have to take a step back from your job as a reporter, almost to because it's a fine line when you're a reporter, because you're often dealing with emergency responders who it's their job is actually saving the people, and your job is telling people about what's going on. So you have to take a step back and understand that these emergency responders, their job is the top priority right now, and just getting the kids that needed the help they got, because the extrication took more than 2 hours, some of those kids. So obviously the firefighters and the emergency responders, the EMTs, their job was so much more important than anything I could do at that moment. Even though, we're trying to get the word out, it's frustrating, but you also have to take a step back and kind of understand at the same time.
Yeah, and you actually told us that after the fact, you said 5 died that day. The 6 died afterwards in the hospital. You had a connection with the mother that of that child that died in the hospital. Tell us about that.
We had received a phone call from that mom the day of, because her child was in the hospital, and I called her Wednesday morning because she said that she wanted to talk to us. So I called her and I was like, we would love to come meet with you. I know your child's still in the ICU, but we could just do a little quick sit down. We wouldn't take much of your time. We just want to kind of hear what your child's going through. You kind of recount what it was like and that sort of thing. And she had said, I don't think I can do it today because my child is really not doing well. It's like, okay, not going to push it. You're in the ICU. Obviously, your child is much more important than any TV interview right now. And then around 6:30 that night, got a text message from her just saying he died. And that was the hardest thing because, now a sixth child has died, and she just told me via text message that her child passed away. And what do you say back to that?
What did you say back to that? Yeah.
I tried to compose this text message that was just like, first of all, thank you for letting me know. We're all thinking of you. We were really, really pushing for your child, and just know that the community is behind you in going forward, and everyone just wants to really help you through the holidays and through the next few months and years that it's going to be difficult, but we're here for you, whatever you need us to do. So it was showing them how much the community actually supported them, I think really helped, because the stories following, like the next, we're still covering stories where people are holding fundraisers, and today the memorial just came down. So some of the families were getting specific pieces of the memorial because a huge memorial grew where the accident happened. And, all these people are donating teddy bears and donating this and making Thanksgiving baskets. I'm sure they'll do something for Christmas too. So it's just to see that those are the great stories we get to tell now of people coming together to help these families.
And, going back to that moment when you got the text message, despite what we've heard over the course of the media cycle for the past few months, we're people too. When you get a text message and it's weird that this happens. 4 years ago this week, Sandy Hook happened, and that was happening in my home state when I was elementary school students died. I don't care who you are, and I don't care what job you do. When you hear about children dying, it will affect you on a level. And was it, after you got that message, was it difficult to do your job?
At that time, my heart just it sunk. And it was, I had left work that day. We had finished up. It was a little bit later. I got the text. I think I was working. For some reason, I was home already. And, I'm just kind of glad that I was home. Fortunately, well, not fortunately, but I had never met that family yet. I feel like that made it a teeny bit easier, but not really. It's just one of those things you almost didn't believe it at first because it was just like a text message, Yeah. And then getting the pictures the next day, and really, we sent another reporter to go talk to the family, and that made it more real, I guess, when you finally see the pictures and hear their voice.
Have you kind of compartmentalized this? And I don't want to say, because there still are follow-ups to be done, but moved on. Do you still think about this story? Do you still have lingering effects from it? Do you still, have flashbacks to stuff you had to cover in some of the tougher moments? Because I've heard that does happen when someone covers a story like this, of this magnitude. It stays with you for a while.
It definitely does, because it's still fresh. It hasn't even been a month. It's just been a few weeks. For me, I would say definitely not as, I still think about it a lot, but I know I would be thinking about it much more if I was on the scene that day. And it's just like the stories I had to tell from this accident were a little bit different. So because they were more investigation focused, it kind of made it easier to take yourself out of the complete awful tragedy that happened and put yourself more into, well, why was he doing this? And, what else can they figure out from this? And what about seatbelts? And so it was like you could almost focus on different things to try to take your mind off of just how terrible the accident really was.
And I guess, you're there, you're out and about covering these stories. Has there been feedback from the community? What have they been saying since this happened? And now that you guys are focusing on, I guess, the better parts, the good stuff that always comes out of tragedies.
I mean, right away, even like the next day, people were just so impressed with how the community really came together, like what you're seeing in Gatlinburg right now. I don't know if it's maybe a Tennessee thing or maybe you just experience enough tragedies that it becomes easier to come together. But I feel like those are the stories that people are liking to see more and, just can relate to more. Just like people really just coming together for each other and the happy end of the story.
All right, Lauren, we'll get you out on this. Did you feel like there was anything that you might have missed, and being, a critical journalist looking back on it? Do you think there's anything that you might have missed as a journalist? Maybe something that you could have done a little bit better in this story? It's a tough thing because you have to delicately balance the facts of the story, and they might be unpleasant, with the human element of just the tragedy of children dying. How do you think you handled it overall?
I mean, of course, there are ways that you can improve. Absolutely. I feel like in this, you just kind of need to really focus on the people, and all of our stories really need to be about the people that are affected. So even if it's, I remember one of the reporters, she actually spoke with the woman whose house was right, like the property of the accident. So it's like telling her story and just telling, because those are the stories that people want to hear. They want to hear about the people that are affected and how they can help the people that are affected. So I think that's important to always focus on, even when you're telling these tragic stories, just to remember that we're kind of like all in this together, and you really need to just, I don't know if this is making sense, but really just focus on the people who are affected the most.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, when you cover stories like that, sometimes it doesn't make sense because 6 children died on their way home from school.
And you're trying to explain to people why this happened when you really have no idea how this could have happened. Exactly.
Well, Lauren, we appreciate you telling your story, and hopefully you've inspired somebody to do what you've done and kind of take a tough story, but do the best they can with it. And that's what we want to get out of these interviews. We want to let people know how difficult your jobs are, our jobs are sometimes, but that they can be very rewarding when you're able to tell the story and tell it right. So we appreciate you being on.
Lauren, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, and actually we want you to stick around because we're going to close out the show, and I want this to be I didn't talk about this with Matt, but
whoa, surprise!
Well, bringing on you a little bit here, Matt. I'd like to close the shows from now on out, taking a look at something silly, stupid, whatever.
Oh, Nate,
somebody says on social media.
The kicker, Nate.
The kicker.
This is the kicker. Absolutely. So I want to read a tweet that Mr. Sean Hannity tweeted out just a couple of days ago.
Your boy.
We're not getting into that. So this is it. Here is a truth. Everybody on TV is overpaid and spoiled. Fact. I'm the only one who admits it. That is a verbatim tweet from Sean Hannity.
Stab me to the heart.
Absolutely right,
Who wants
Sean.
to start?
Absolutely right, Sean. Nate, Lauren, you, me, all three of
You
us
nailed
will
it.
jump into our Maserati as soon as we're done podcasting and speed off to our Bev Hills mansion. It'd be great. I know. Look,
I'm glad we have someone that can.
We're not complainers. I'm not trying to complain, but like,
No.
you know, it's funny. You might have gotten this before. You've gotten stopped on the street. You know, somebody says to me, "It must be nice to make the big bucks," and I go, "Yeah, must be. I guess."
Let me
You
know.
got that TV salary. Oh yeah, I got that TV salary.
Yeah, it must be nice. You want to be my MOS? You want to talk to me on camera about that? No, not me.
No, that's good. There's a couple of things that strike me in the tweet. First, he says, "This is a fact, not the fact," or, you know, it's a fact. I can make up a fact right now if I wanted to, which he did, actually.
It's a fact.
And he said, "I'm the only one that's going to admit this." Look, buddy, you work for Fox News. You probably make...
He probably get paid very well.
7 figures?
Big.
He makes 7 figures.
Gets paid
Maybe
very well.
8.
Sure.
I'm making 5 figures, all right? I started off, my first job, I made $10 an hour.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
About that.
Heck, I think I made
that's how-
less than that.
See, you might have. I got paid very well for my first job. I won't even lie. I've heard of much worse. And it is a grueling thing when you get out of school and you're ready to tackle the world, and your first job offer, I went to Mankato, Minnesota. Never been there before in my life, from Florida originally, and had to suffer through cold and whatnot for $10 an hour. It's just, that's something, I mean, that happens. That's everybody that starts. Everybody.
When
Go
you
ahead.
have your part-time job and you're making more money in your part-time job than you do in your full-time job, that you're
Correct.
like, thank goodness I finally got this job, and you're like, oh well.
Well, we'll see about that.
I ran the teleprompter for $13 an hour, and I got a on-air job for $10 an hour.
Oh no, you didn't.
Yes. So that is, and you know, and the thing is, you know, that's the part that scares a lot of people away. I think that I mean, you know, it's not easy. The first couple of years, and I tell my students, and for those of you who don't know, I'm an adjunct professor at Florida A&M University. Go Rattlers. I tell my students, look, you're not going to be driving a Ferrari. You're not going to be making a lot of money. For the first 2 years, it's probably going to be tough, maybe a little more. But you get to your second job, and it's a little more livable. And if you keep going, you get to your third job, hopefully, you know, you can live a little bit better. And that's, you know, nobody gets in. God, I hate this phrase. I hate this phrase with all of my heart. Nobody gets into this job for the money, Matt. Yeah, I know that. I'm well aware. I'm well aware. But you know, none of my buddies I graduated with get told that at their job. So, but no, it's true. You know, I got into this job to tell stories and to really create, you know, something I like. And that's one of the reasons I like doing this podcast. I like creating this kind of stuff with you and Lauren. It's great having you on. It was, you know, and I'm sure you guys all feel the same way. We got into this business to tell stories, to do what we like doing.
And we're not getting paid for this either, by the way. So
No, we're not. No, we're not. But
we're not increasing our financial portfolio by doing this podcast either. So.
Absolutely not. But I will say this: if you like or share or leave a comment or review, you will get
a shout out.
Oh,
you will.
The next podcast, and it'll be great. Like, you can't put a price on that. I know that. So
some people could actually.
Sean Hannity could. You get a shout out from Sean Hannity.
Maybe.
Probably a 4-figure shout out. You know, $1,000 a shout out.
Where are we gonna put the decimal point in that 4 figures?
At the front.
At the front.
At the front.
That's it. All right, guys. We'll end on that. We appreciate you watching the first episode, not the pilot. You can watch the pilot on BehindTheScreensPodcast.com. But this should be a great thing going forward. Matt, as always, appreciate it. Lauren, thank you for being our guinea pig first guest.
Had a lot of fun. Hope you had fun, Lauren.
I did.
Yeah. All right. We will see you guys next week.